This is Gemara Baba Kama Daf Kof Yud. V'siyata Shemaya, as we mentioned, we are closing in Baruch Hashem, 9 daf away, a lengthy Masechta, and already we could start smelling Baba Mitzia on the horizon. Says the Gemara, 3 lines from the wide lines on Kof Tesem and Beis, touching upon a slightly, we would call it, unrelated sugya. A little bit of a kachim sugya, but as we'll see, it's something that was brought up previously. Tanu Rabbanan, says the Gemara, Menayin Lekayin, Shebo Makiv Karbonaisa B'choleis Ub'chol Shah Sheyirtzeh. Where do we know that a kayin is allowed to come, bring karbanais whenever he would like, his own personal karbanais, Ub'chol Shah Sheyirtzeh, and the karbanais work? Talmud Leimar, we learn this out from the pasuk that says, Uba b'chol ois nafshoi v'sharei b'chol avas nafshoi, And therefore the pasuk says, Shekam, whenever his nefesh desires, avas from the word taiva, desires, uminayin sha'avoida va'ira shaloi. And how do we know that the avoida, which refers to the basar, the meat, I see you can't see the words. There you go. How do you know that the avoida, the basar, the oirai, and the hides he keeps to himself? Talmud Leimar says the pasuk v'isas kedoshav lo yihiyeh, that it should be to himself. Ketzad, explains the Gemara, how do we see this? If the kayin brought a carbon, was a balmum, and therefore can't bring the carbon to himself by himself, what does he do? He gives the carbon to the kayin of that mishmar, and the meat and the oirai and the hides belong to himself. On the top of Kov Yod Amid Aleph, let's say the kayin that we're talking about is a zakin, is elderly, or he's not well, then Nasa the Chol Kayin Sheyirtzeh, he can give to whatever kayin that he wants. Rashi points out the fact that he's a zakin or a chayla means he's not ready to do the avodah. The anshe mishmar. Then the avodah, the meat, then the oirai, the hides, he does not keep, but rather, what does he do with them? Rather, he has to give it to the people of his mishmar. Continues the Gemara, what's the case? If he's able to do the avodah, then ask the Gemara, if he's able to do the avodah, then everything should go to himself. Continues the Gemara, 5 lines down, if he can't do the avodah, then how could he create a shliach? So Amar Rav Papa explains, Rav Papa, Amar Rav Papa, you know what we're talking about over here? If he wanted to, he could push himself to do the avodah al yidei adchak, and from here, avodah d'chiyavet le al yidei adchak avodahi, and therefore would have been a good avodah if he would have done it himself. And because he is theoretically shaykh, he could do the avodah, albeit with difficulty. Therefore, umashli shliach achila. Therefore, umashli shliach, he makes a shliach to perform the avodah. Achila, when it comes to eating the carbon, that if you were to eat it, that would not be appropriate eating. It would be an achila gasai, v'achila gasa lav klomhu. And that's why part 2 is Vishamachi Avadasa v'ayir anshe mishmar. So Rabba explains that the reason why we're splitting, that the actual bringing of the carbon is to whomever he wants, the hides and the meat go to the anshe mishmar. Explains Rav Papa, the reason is that he's able to do the avodah al yidei adchak. So to do the avodah al yidei adchak, that you're able to. But to eat al yidei adchak, that does not work because of the concept of achila kasa. Continues the Gemara 12 lines down. The first line is Mishmar Amar Rav Sheishas Emayatav Kayin Tame Bekarban Sibur. Says Rav Sheishas, if there's a Kayin who is Tame and he has to bring a carbon of the people, nice l'chami sheyir to give to whoever he wants. Avadas of Ayrai Lanshe Mishmar. Says the Gemara Echidami Idika Tahirim Tameim. What's the case over here? Idika Tahirim, excuse me. If there are people who are tar, then Tameim Mimatzi Avdi. Are Tameim able to bring the carbon? Of course not. So he is not considered to be shaykh, to be roi, to bring the carbon. As if you look at Rashi about 10 lines down, Avdi, and because he's not able to do it because he's Tamei, Matzi Avdi, Shliach Echem Ashvi. So the same kasha as we had a moment ago. He shouldn't be able to make a Shliach. Continues the Gemara. V'delekatayrim, if there's no that's tahar, avadaso erilan she mishmar. So then why are you giving the meat, the hides, to the people of the mishmar? Hatameim nenu. They are tamei v'lo matziachlin. They can't eat it. So I asked the Gemara on Rav Sheishas, when do we have this case that we're going to split, that the actual bringing of the carbon is a chomi sheyertzeh, and the meat and the hide is going to the anshe mishmar? Amar Rava explains, Rava Ema, let us suggest that the case that we're discussing over here is lebale mumim tahirim shebaisai mishmar. That really they are tar, but because they have a mum, that's the reason. That's the reason why they can't bring the carbon, and that's the reason why Rav Sheshes taught us that he gives out the carbon to whomever he wants, whereas the meat and the hides go to the Anshe Mishmar. Continues the Gemara Amar Rav Ashi. If the Kohen Gadol is an Einain, Kohen Gadol relative died, Einain the one of the death before the Kvura, so Allah is he can't bring any karbanis, but he has to bring a carbon. Says the Gemara, what's the Chiddush Hanin? We learned in the Mishnah, Kohen Gadol makriv Einain, but ve'ino oichel, ve'ino chelik, ve'ino oichel, excuse me, ve'ino chelik la'achol la'erev. He doesn't take it to eat at night. So since he's able to bring the carbon on his own, therefore it makes sense that he can give it to someone else, but he's not going to get the basar, he's not going to get the hides. Answers the Gemara, Ki chas rachman alei de kohen gadol is when lekruvehu. Avalishavi shliach, maybe loma mashi, we wouldn't be able to make a shliach. Kamash v'lan, that he can even make a shliach. And that's really a sidebar sugya dealing with at what point a kohen can appoint a shliach, at what point a kohen gets the basar, the meat of the carbon, and the hides, etc. Continues the Gemara, continues with the Mishnah, halfway down Kaf Yud Amud Aleph. A Mishnah that comes back to halachas of Geneva, Gezela, etc. If someone steals from a ger v'nishba loy, and he swears falsely, umeis, and then the ger dies, and there's no yarsham mariza mishan karen v'chaimesh to whom likoy hanim v'asham lemizbeach, halacha that we had quoted prior. Shenemar, says the Torah, v'mein goyal hashem Hashem elav Hashem amoishav laHashem lakoyin amoishav laHashem lakoyin. So here we see that if there's no one to give the payments to, it goes to Hashem, it goes to the Mizbeach, and then it goes to the Kohanim. Case 2 in the Mishnah. He's middle of bringing up the money, the Asham, to Yushalayim, Umeis, and he's nifter on the way. The money given to the Kanav's children. The Asham Yirah has to go and pasture until it develops a mom, v'yimkar, and sold the bludamba of the nadav, and the money is used for voluntary karbanos in the Beis Hamikdash. Nasan HaKesef. Nasan HaKesef Lanshei Mishmar. Continues the Mishnah. Now what happens If he brought up the money, he gave the money to the Anshe Mishmar. But then what happened was, Umeis, he dies before the carbon ashin is brought. Then Ina Yarshim Yechailin Lahaitzi Miyadam. The Yarshim are not able to take the money from his possession. Shenamar Visha Yitin Lekayin Lo Yiyeh. Once it's given to the Kayin, it remains by him. Finally, the Mishnah continues with din number 3. Nasan Akasav Liyahairav. Vasham Liyadeyo. If he gave the money to the Mishnah of Yahairav, and he gave the carbon to the Mishmar of Yediyahu, two different Mishmarais, Yatza. But Asham Liyahairav, Akasav Liyadav. So Kaima Asham, if the carbon's still around, Yakivenu B'nei Yodah. Bring another carbon. What's the reason? So explains the Mishnah, because Shehamevi Gezela, one who brings the Gezela, one who brings that which he stole to the Beis HaMikdash for a kapara, Hevi Ashamai Yatza. If he brings the carbon Asham, Yatza, he's Yaitse what he has to bring. If he brings the carbon before he paid back for the gzela, lo yatsa. Nasan is a karim, nasan is a chaimish, and a chaimish ma'akiv. The chaimish is not ma'akiv. So says the Gemara. Let's start with part A of the Mishnah, which was the case of Gazel from Hager. Tana Rabbanan Asham Zekeren, Amoishav Zechaimish. The pasuk that says the Asham they have to give to Hashem for the Kayin, that refers to the Karen that you returned. Ha Moishav, when the pasuk continues, it says that was returned. That refers to the Chaimish you have to pay. Oyena, or perhaps Oyena Yela Asham. Oyena Yela Asham Ze'ayil. Or maybe when the Torah says Asham refers to the ayil of the carbon, which he has to bring as the kapara. So the Gemara wants to know, is it referring to the keren, the principal money that you have to return, or the carbon? It says, what's the difference? Because basically, either way, you're going to have to bring the carbon and pay the keren. Says Rava, if someone returned something to the ger at night, lo yatsa, he is not yatsa. Hechziru chatzayin lo yatsa. My time. What's the reason that if he returns that which he stole from the ger, so Toma refers to the you turned it to the kohanim, you're not yatsa. My time. Asham kairachmana. The Torah calls it an asham shoimer milvad eliki purim avyomer asham zeh keren. From here we learn out that you have to be returning both the asham and as well the keren has to be paid. So says the Gemara, Tani Idoch, have another brace. Asham zeh keren, Moshev zeh chaimesh. Oh, you know the asham zeh chaimesh, the man avgemina, the same kasha. Lafuki b'mastisan. We've come lafuki our mishnah time. Nasal los keren, nasal los chaimesh and chaimesh ba'akiv. Adorable. What do we see? We see chaimesh ba'akiv. So therefore, Kshoimer, when the pasuk says, "V'ishav zashama b'roish chamishisa yavi oimer asham zeh keren." Here we see that the asham is the keren, and therefore it's not going to be ma'akev. Says the Gemara Tani Idacha, third brayso, about 8 lines to the bottom. The first line is asham. Asham zeh keren amoishav zeh chaim b'shu begazel ager akasa midaber. And the Torah is talking about specifically when he gazel ager, the payment of the keren, the payment of the chaim. Yinel amoishav zeh kefel. Gnevas ager akasa midaber. When the Torah says v'ishav zashamay b'roish chasisa reimamoin hamishtalim b'roish akasav midaber. So 3 braisas honing in on the dinim of Gazal Hager. Says the Gemara Gufa. Now let's go a little bit deeper. 4 lines to the bottom of Kaf Yud Amud Aleph. Amar Rava Gazal Hager shachzir b'laylo yo yatsa. Chazir lechasayin lo yatsa my time. Mashu karachmana. V'amar Rava Gazal Hager she'in by shave pruta. You sold less than a shave pruta. Cholkain v'kayin lo yatsa yidei chayvasai. Excuse me, one more time. I read it wrong. You stole from the ger, but the amount was not enough to give even a pruta to each kayin. Therefore, Lo yatsi de chavas. If you try to pay back by giving it to the kohen, you're not yoyt. Say my times. We're learning out new dinim of the Chiyav Hashava. Says the Gemara, has to be given to each and every kohen. Now that we've laid out that framework on the last line, Bayi Rava, Ein Baile Mishmeres Yayarav. If there's not enough, because we just said that which you stole, you have to have enough to give a pruta to each member of the mishmar currently serving. Says the Gemara, there's different mishmaros. So what if there's not enough money to give to the mishmar of Yayarav? But v'yeshva, you turn over to Kaviyurim Abayz, Lemishmeres Yidayah. Mao, how do we view such a story? That there is enough money to give to one mishmar, there's not enough money to give to the other mishmar. So top of Kuf Yerim Abayz says the Gemara, Heichi Dami, let's go a little bit deeper. What exactly is the case that we are discussing? Says the Gemara, Lame of the case is, second line Kuf Yerim Abayz, Yaveh liyada b'mishmeres yada. You gave it to Yada while it was Yada's turn in the Beis HaMikdash. So of course it works. Hayisbei, there's enough to give the whole Mishmar. So that can't be the Shaila. Meaning, if there's enough money to give Yada, and his Mishmar is currently serving, so of course it works. That's the kasha. Mi amrinan. Do we say kivan de la mishmar tayu v'loy klamu? Right now, Yoyarov is serving. You don't have enough to pay back Yoyarov, but then you give to Yedah, and you had enough to give to Yedah. Says the Gemara, does that work? But no, he's not serving right now. Or maybe because it's not enough to give back to Yoyarov, it's Ki'ilu, waiting the whole time to give it to Yedah. Teku, says the Gemara, we have to wait for such a shayla. Bai Rava Kahanim Mau Shechlu Gezel Kahanim Mau Shechlu Gezel Ager Keneged Gezel Ha Ger. Asks Rava 10 lines down, Kavira Mebase. Are the Kahanim able to split up that which they get from one ger versus what they get from another ger? Mi Amrin Ashakar Rachmana. Whatever Asham you get, you can't swap with another one. Av Gazel and Cholkin Gazel Ager Keneged Gezel Ager. Again, if there's two people that stole from the Gerim, they have to return both of them to the Kehanim. Could the Kehanim swap what they're getting or not? So it says the Gemara is like the carpenter, you can't switch. Odelma, Kozal Ager, Mimaino. It's like money, and of course money you could swap. Hadar Pasha, he answered, Asha Karim Rachman, it's considered Asha, therefore you cannot switch that which you got from one Irish, one Ger, to another. Ravacha, Brady Rava Masi Labahedya. Explicit, Amai Rava, Kahanim Cholkin, Gezel Ager, Keneged Gezel Ager, my Taima, Asham, Kari Rachmana. And we continue with the two dots, about 14 lines down, another Shaila of Rava. Ba'i Rava, Kahanim Begezel Ager, Yershim Have, Oy Mikabla Matanas Have. When the Kayhanim, and these are obviously very similar fundamental shaylas, how do we view Yarshim of someone? So now the Gemara wants to know that the Kayhanim are entitled to the payments from someone who stole to the Ger. So what is the Kayan's entitlement? What is his relationship to the coming money? Is it that he's like a Yairish? Or is it that he is like one who's accepting a present? L'maynaf kamina, says the Gemara. Koshigazal chameis, the classical case, shavar lava pesach. So yami yarshin ave hainu hai tirasi myris. If you're going to tell me that they're like yarshim, then the answer is, where do we just go? If they're like yarshim, hainu hai, then the chametz is that which they inherited, the arti myris. And therefore, by giving it back, you're yaitse returning it, even though there's no value to the item right now. It's not considered like you're giving him anything. Why? So a fundamental shaila by Rava, how do we view the kohanim with regard to the payments that they're getting from the yarshim of a ger? I should say the yarshim of the ger, one who is guzzled from a ger. And therefore, he has to pay to the Kohanim, or they consider the Yarshim, or they consider Makabli Matan. Rav Zira Ba'i Hachi. Rav Zira asked the Shaila, slightly different. Afilu intim slimer, if you're going to tell me Mekabli Matana, that's kind of like one who accepts a present. Halai Bailon. That Halai Bailon. We have no questions. What's the status with regard to giving back the chametz? Why you can give it back. But the question is, Rav Zira said that he matana Amar Achmana Dinesivlu. That's what the Torah says. Elikikam yibaylan kon shenafula eser behemais begazel hager mechayvu lafrushe minayu meiser. Oiloi says Ziri. It's not a shayla whether you can pay back the chametz. It's a different shayla. In the event that the kohen accepted 10 different animals in payment for a ger, do we say that now in the possession of the kohen he has to give off meiser? Do we say Yorshin Havi Damer Mar Kanat Vizabayis Chayavim? It's like a Yarish that when you get something from the Yerusha, it's like your house bought it for you have to give Meiser Idelma. Says the Gemara, Mekable Matana is 4 lines of the wide lines. Have Utanan Halakevani Deloy Bimatana. Potter Bimeiser Behema. You don't have to give Meiser Behema. Mai. What's the halach? Explains the Gemara Tashima. Esim V'arba, 2 lines of the white lines. Matana is Kuhuna Ninu L'Arin L'Banov. V'kulan Nitnu Bechlalu Pradu Klal. Ubris Mela Kulam Nitnu Bechlalu Pradu Klalu Bris Melech. Explains the Gemara now on the first wide line. Kola Mekablim Kilu Mekai Kola Mekayamin. Anyone who keeps these gas, Kilu Mekayim Klalu Pradu Klalu Bris Melech. Meaning, if you do what's right, you're following a Klalu Pradu Klal and a Bris. And Kol Oiver Aleim, unfortunately, Kilu Oiver Al Klalu Pradu Klalu Bris Melech. Veilu Hein, one of the 24, Matnas Kahuna, Eser B'Mikdash, is referring to the 10 given to the Kahanim of the Beis HaMikdash, Dalit Yushalayim, Eser B'Gvulim. Eser B'Mikdash is what? Chatas Beima, Chatas Oif. Ve'asham v'adev, Asham tali 4, v'zivchei shlamim zibar, ve'lo gshemin shal mitzayra, u'ma'isera, imer shtei alechem, lechem apanim v'shayam min chais. 10 karbanis, they go to the kain. V'arba b'Yushalayim is what? Abachayr v'abikurim, v'amayr min atayra, ve'ayel nazir. And the arba from Yushalayim are, 1 second, I apologize. I knew something sounded right. That which comes off for the carbon to give to the carbon. Is kachim. Vasara begvulin is what chuma's ma'isa v'chalor. They gaze nice opinion haben opinion but the chamar v'sei chuzos the chram v'gezel agar v'kakari mias matana. Says the Gemara in this list is gezel agar. It's called a matana. Shema mina mekab the matana zave. Shema mina proves the Gemara that when the kohen gets in a payment for the ger, it's considered like his mekabel matana. Is you have to think of chuma. We'll pick it up from the 2 dots next year. B'siyata dishmaya.